Tactical Brigade back in action. It's time for the cunning lads to step up, get combined arms, get stuck in, and get creative. So let's get into it, Orks. As today, it's going to be a comprehensive breakdown as to how to use Ork Tactical Brigade in its maximum capacity, intermediate, beginner, whatever it may be. You're going to understand this detachment, know how to utilize multiple different kind of units, and even certain degrees archetypes will be explored today. We will not hit all the lists that we can, as that is another video, but we will have all the nice tidbits, creative ideas, thoughts, unit combinations, and so much more. So, with that being said, let's get into it. And of course, let's listen here, lads, as the detachment has changed a little bit in this rule. So, we're going to just briefly cover this. So, as always, once per battle round in your command phase or when you're set up in the movement phase. So that means if you get out of a transport or if you come in from a battlefield edge, each boss Nikra or mech or war boss can issue orders. So the cool thing about Snikra is he can either choose to do an order in the command phase or when he's picked up and redeployed, right? These other guys will be dependent on whether they start the battlefield on the table or if they're getting out when they do their order. Now, if you do one of these orders, it has to be a unit within 6, or a lot of the time you're doing it to the unit that you are currently leading. If you fail the leadership test once you choose an order, you end up taking 1 mortal wound. Now, a lot of people think that just because you failed the leadership test, you don't have the order. That's not the case. Your orc punches him in the head, and then he goes, okay, I'm listening. My bad. I took a mortal wound. All right, so yes, he'll end up taking the order until the next command phase. But this can only be once per battle round. So like I just mentioned with Boss Nikrat, he can't give an order in the command phase and then also move, redeploy, and then give another order. If he could, that would be really awesome. He'd be able to give multiple orders, but it's clear that you can't do that with him. So don't try to give orders multiple times. But in that, why it matters is because if you get battle shocked, you also lose the order that you have, or you cease to be able to even get one, right? So let's just say that you get Shadow of the Warped, and boom, you don't have the ability to take any orders, or if you did have orders, you have currently lost them. So just keep that in mind, or if anybody makes you take one, like if an orc unit from another opposing player shoots you with a shock attack gun, or if a Terminator unit runs into your unit, makes you take a battle shock, and you fail that battle shock, there you go. I mean, then you end up losing your leadership or tactic ability. Sorry. So now let's move into these actual tactics, as sometimes they seem really straightforward, but there's a little bit more depth to them than people sometimes think. So get stuck in, lads. You can re-roll charges made for this unit. This used to be an innate orc rule in 8th edition and before that, where all orc units just simply got to re-roll all charges they had made and they attempted, excuse me. So this is really valuable in an orc unit when it's really go time sometimes and you need to get across the battlefield on a now-one turn because your unit's still alive and he's trying to make progress up the field once in a while. Not too dynamic. The thing that is interesting here about this is that it can be used on units that aren't infantry or mounted, so it counts to vehicles. You can end up making a vehicle reroll charges. So we will talk about how even Titanic units can have play in this detachment. This is one of the cases, well, sometimes when it's in the Great WAAAGH, late game, maybe your mech's still alive, your Titanic unit's floating around, you want to give them reroll charges. Not too dynamic, but it can happen. It is the least dynamic, but we'll get into the rest. Now we get into get on with it. Add 1 strength to melee weapons in this unit. Now, this is really fun, but it really also matters a lot for a lot of the breakpoints that happen into the meta. Currently, as we see it right now, as we speak, demons are rising. Death Guard are getting a new codex where they're getting higher toughness thresholds. There's little mini Marine Leagues of Voltan running around with their higher toughness. Toughness is evolving in 40k and becoming more and more relevant as to adding strength becomes more and more interesting on a bunch of different units. Orcs have a plethora of it, not just simply snagas or knobs or anything like that. Well, so we'll talk more about that in this video too, as well as the obvious ones. Then we have, and keep in mind, this strength order or tactic can be given to a vehicle as well, because it's not limited to an infantry or mounted. So keep in mind, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So then we have sneaky stalk-in. So this is limited to infantry and mounted, and then it excludes mega knobs. So very nice of you, GW, to do that. We don't appreciate it, but all right, fine. This unit has stealth ability. Boom, pretty straightforward. Can be interesting for mounted units once in a while as we talk about mounted units. As for infantry, there are matchups. Let's just say you're going into an ultimate enemy unit that doesn't have the ability to make your tank bustas -1 to hit. Well, in that case, you might not need the redundancy of +1 to hit on that tank buster unit. You might as well give yourself stealth in that case, right? So there's times where stealth will be very important. If you go into an enemy unit and you're able to overkill them in melee when it's the go time and you're on your wall, you might just simply have already given your whole army stealth. As you understand, the army you're playing, maybe Tau or Astra Militarum, is really one shooting phase dependent. Therefore, having stealth combined on your wall makes it way better go value than simply having +1 pib strength, for example. Dependent on what you're hitting, though, of course, right? I'll do context. Then we have shoot a drill. So this is straightforward. Everyone's favorite order tactic. +1 to hit when you're shooting. Boom. Now, what I really like about this is that obviously it goes on the most powerful units that we need in this detachment, such as tank busters, everybody aware of, flash gits, stuff like that. But it also gives you options for something like a Luda's unit, as we'll explore a little bit more interestingly, even skirmish units that you'll be able to they give out tactic orders to outside of the wall turn or outside of those really dynamic missiles that we're going to have on this detachment. You can just enhance everything in that and make orcs a little bit more combined arms, able to clear screens and deliver damage that enemies aren't really necessarily expecting. And then last but not least, we have the most important, the most interesting, fun part of this is keyword Storm Boys gain the battle line keyword. Now, this is a lot of time overlooked. And you simply think, well, you're just going to have 5 Storm Boys anyways. They're going to do their secondary and be on their way. Maybe they'll raise me a banner one day on mission A. But we'll talk about in this video as to how you can actually get a bit more out of your Storm Boys if you're someone who actually appreciates Storm Boys. So let's get to the Gitz with the keywords. And also, let's get a wall for the chat. Whoa, came out a little powerful today. I see you guys out here in the chat, nice and strong, boys. So keep up at that wall energy. That way we can keep this going. There's a long one. We're going to try to make it concise so that we don't drag on, though, for the Gitz. So we have Gitz with the keyword. Let's just go through it because make it nice and easy for anybody who's new. When I mentioned the mechs and the war bosses, let's break down these guys real quick and maybe some utilities they may bring just a little bit. We have the Beast Boss. The fact that this detachment has interesting stratagem of getting able to get sustain, and the Beast Boss himself just being really good at delivering damage outside the wall or on the wall. That's a really, really armor and monster and demon heavy, meta out there right now. As for a Beast Boss, just goes a good long way, good point for point value and such. So Beast Bosses are something you can see in this detachment, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. We have War Bosses and Mega Armors that have access to the stratagem as well. Not typically something you see too often in this detachment, but to each their own that they preference her own. Then we have a Big Mech. Big Mechs are a little bit slept on, in my opinion, overall in understanding and utility of orc players. And as we understand that the Big Mech with shock attack gun, for example, might be going up in points, I think it's behoove of everybody to at least take a look at the Big Mech's data sheet and start getting and understanding his utility a little bit in the detachment. The fact that tank busters are so prevalent here, where we know that they're pretty much prevalent in every detachment, but in this detachment, because they're getting +1 to hit, so they can even hit enemies that are outside of, that are not vehicles, for example, means that GW's, hovering around them sometimes with their eyes. So a Big Mech allows you to bring a combined arms aspect for his punching ability. He gains the additional pib of AP and strength from the tank busters, pulsar gun as well. And he can even lead Ludas in a fun way in this detachment that we'll explore in a little bit. So Big Mechs are slept on, and I think he's actually goes a little bit further than people expect. Then we have the Big Mech and Mega Armor. He's usually just going on that big brick of 10-man flash kits that we'll talk about in a bit. Big Mech with shock attack gun. Obviously has good options with what everybody's aware of as the tank busters currently in the meta, as his anti-tank potential. It can really not be duplicated to an exact, simply because he can get up to AP 5, which means he's really, really good into what everybody hates as Space Marine vehicles a lot of the time, punching through Tyranid as well, armor as well. So shock attack gun's hard to replace. Then we have war bosses, just this basic keyword infantry war boss as well that we all know and love, giving out orders. We have Gazgul, where Gazgul a lot of the time is looked at because he doesn't need the order, so people kind of overlook him of even being a choice in this detachment. But he's known and proven out that he goes a long way in any detachment that he has access to sustain, and really in any access to army that he wants to give combined arms aspect to. But the fact that he gets an order that he's not too reliant on, other than giving himself reroll charges when it's really go time, means on the other turns where he's kind of staged up, if you have units that are near him, he becomes interesting to give out orders to maybe a 5-man unit of flash kits that are go getting a fight, a 10-man unit of boys that are go getting in a fight, that have maybe deployed near him. Keep in mind, if they got out of a transport, he can't give them the order because he has to give the order on the command phase. Therefore, this would be a premeditated move by you, but that just goes with other things that we'll talk about this detachment that makes it possible. So, Gaz is overlooked a lot of the time, even when considering this attachment, but he's tried and true. He's proven. We'll talk more about that a little bit. Then we have what I like to call the sneaky Gitz, where we have the units that actually give a little bit more utility as to what the tactics can be ordered. Now, Gaz is kind of in the same ballpark because he gives orders more often than people expect, and other than just to himself. A lot of the time, people consider this detachment as all the character-led units are going to act as individual missiles. They're going to give themselves an order simply. But then a lot of Ork players want to run this as kind of like a guard, a pseudo-guard style, where they can have tactical cunning, decision-making, skirmish enhancing, and such like that. That's where Gaz and the sneaky Gitz get a little bit more play. That's because they can actually end up in places to give skirmishing units orders so that they can fight. And we'll talk about that and as well as we continue. And then we have mounted characters. So a lot of time mounted characters are overlooked, and it's typically for good reason. And we'll talk about them a little bit more. But we have Maz, Death Killer, Wartrack, and then Beast Boss on Squigglesaur. So just because they're overlooked doesn't mean we won't talk about them and give them a little bit of love. So stay tuned about that as we break that down. But we move on to the enhancements. Now, Orks are kind of what is it called? Losing the word here, but spoiled, for choices among our entire codex of our great enhancements. And this is one of the detachments where we don't have actually that many good enhancements. So this is the one exception to a lot of the other ones where I'm like, I kind of want to take 3 or whatever. And this one, it's like, take 1, probably, maybe 2. But the one that you're going to take is Mech Captain. So Big Mech and Mega Armor, or Big Mech with Shock Attack Gun, can be attached to a unit of flash kits, and it makes the unit reroll the entire hit roll. So this is very, very mandatory type unit to bring, and the most proficient unit that you bring with it as a leader is the Big Mech and Mega Armor. So very expensive enhancement, but very much worth it if you're playing this detachment, as the detachment is combined arms heavy, and this big brick allows you to do both very well, especially when it's given orders. Now, this brick itself and this enhancement is a good example of not having to give yourself +1 to hit sometimes, simply allowing the reroll to do its job and giving yourself stealth. In that case, the Big Mech and Mega Armor has a 4-up invul that he's delivering to this unit. So you'll be stacking the 4-up invul in that range, and the stealth you'll be giving that unit. So that's typically how you're running that. Then we have Squad Leader, where we have war boss infantry unit. So no more Death Killer Wartrike. This can be a beast boss. This can be a war boss in Mega Armor. This can be a war boss on foot. The fun part about this, if you stick a beast boss in this unit, the beast boss is giving the unit still +1 to hit. So that Breacher Ram and the Power Claw are going off. He can then give that unit +1 strength. So then now they're getting up to strength 10. And then as we talk about the strats they can do as sustain or lethal, now you can walk up, throw a bomb squig, and then get a charge off without getting overwatched. So really threaten those Space Marine Reapers, for example. Now, how often or prolific is this enhancement? Not very much. But Ork players are tried and true to be creative individuals. So there is merit, there is play here. It's just one of the enhancements that I personally, too, don't find myself putting on the list. That doesn't mean I don't recognize this potential. Then we move on to Mork's Cunning. So this is one of the enhancements that I'm actually in quite favor of, because I love the idea of redeploying Ork units, as a lot of the time you can impose yourself more on the battlefield as an Ork, which is what you want to do. Just like in most of our other detachments, very much in this detachment, though, we don't like to be put on the back foot, because Orks are kind of get in your face, board control, past that middle of the table line, hold you back, whether it's with bodies, points, attrition, whatever it needs to be, and then score the rest of the game. So by just even playing in the redeployment step of this phase, you've now activated as yourself almost another pseudo turn. Now, this goes really well with how we're going to be talking about commandos, where commandos can be placed if you get to deploy first in a big long line across the enemy's battlefield. I mean, in the middle of the battlefield, 9 inches away from the enemy deployment line, deny their abilities to put any infiltrate into the middle of the field, and then simply picking that commando unit back up, as well as picking up maybe 2 different transports that are on the battlefield, or just simply putting something more aggressive on one side of the battlefield because you realize the enemy may be overcommitted. Let's say you lined up one of your most valuable assets on one side of the field, and there's a unit of ACDC, 20-man blob of demons from the demons allies coming down the field, and they've deployed them there. Well, you can simply take that off the field, move it to the other side of the battlefield, and take that still very expensive pressure unit that you have and still get the pressure utility out of it, and then redeploy something else that's maybe more akin to dealing with that brick, like maybe the flash Gitz unit themselves that might be that ACDC unit wanted to avoid. Now you can pick up that flash Gitz brick with Met Captain and put him in the face of that unit. So it can become really interesting, and we'll talk more about that. Then we have GWAAAGH Boomer, which is a fun enhancement to give. Not necessarily always brought either, just like the last 2 I mentioned. But if you have 10 points, it does make your game easier a little bit. And if you're into that cunning git play that we were talking about before, with typically a basic baby mech, you're going to be giving that a boomer to, and allowing him to yell tactics further along the field, enhancing maybe a unit that does of commandos that doesn't have a leader attached to it. And now this is restricted to infantry and mounted, so you can't be yelling at like a vehicle to do it. So it is even more limited than you typically want, but you're typically near a vehicle with the mech anyways, and you're giving a +1 to hit. So you're yelling those orders somewhere else. Not too often, but to be mentioned if you have 10 points left over. Now we talk about the stratagems. Absolutely like the stratagems in this detachment. Unlike I said about the enhancements, in this one, stratagems are quite tasteful and impactful in the game, but none of the stratagems are something that are going to carry you, that have to be played consistently throughout the game in order to win the game, which is good, because if you're near someone with Agents of Vect involved in the game, it doesn't completely shut your game down like maybe it would Warhorde, for example. So you still get great utility out of all of these stratagems, and they are all 1 CP, but none of them are necessarily carrying the entire detachment. They're more so opportunistic or enhancing. So let's talk about that as we break it down, and keep that in mind, because that makes it even better, because a lot of the time you're going to be using your strats on even generic stratagems in this detachment. So we have that's ours in the command phase. Orc unit within engagement range of an enemy unit, so it has to be within engagement range, has to be stuck in combat with them until the start of the next command phase, as 1 objective control to that unit, the models in that unit. So this can be used in your command phase or your opponent's command phase. So that's really impactful. If you have leftover units that are in combat, like a 20-man unit of boys typically are, like Zagrod Wartsnaga typically is, or like we'll talk about more with Storm Boys, maybe some Storm Boys are. Very dynamic in the game for flipping up primary and objectives. If you're a watcher of the channel, you know we absolutely push that a lot of the time as an Orc player. You need to really utilize that as an Orc player overall, generally in all your game plans between all your detachments. But now you have a strat to do that even more so. We're just getting a little bit more bodies on objectives, and in combat with your enemy units, and flipping primary and trading those bodies for points can really be even more dynamic play in the game. So then we have fight proper, which is 1 orc unit or mounted unit, infantry unit or mounted unit, can either choose sustain or lethal. That's absolutely sick. This is one of the only times we can just simply choose lethal to have it, but having access to sustain really unlocks the full potential of Ghazghkull Thraka, for example, of having critical 5+s. You can throw this on him. He'll have sustain 5+ on his own unit and lethal 5+s because Makari's banner. Or you can throw this on a Beast Snagga Boy unit, giving them sustain, whatever it may be. Orcs always love getting more punches on the field. That also makes this more of a combined arms detachment, which is what we really want to see. Then we have tactical retreat. So just after the enemy falls back, just after your orc unit falls back, you're able to put a declare and charge, or shoot and charge. Excuse me, something got in the way when I was reading that. So your orc unit is able to fall back, shoot, and charge. Now, This is very, very, very overlooked, I think, for the orc player sometimes. Now, why I say that is because as an orc player, if an enemy understands that they can't kill all your threats, they will take the initiative away from you and charge your threats. So, like we spoke about with the Beast Snagga boss, for example, if you're running multiple of those units within trucks, sometimes enemy players can't pop the transport and then also kill the unit within, but sometimes they might be able to charge into you. And in that case, they've taken away your devastating 4+ potential, and now you're just in combat with them, in just typical combat with them, and you didn't actually get a charge off on them. Or if it's a 20-man unit of orc boys that got popped out of a wagon, maybe a demon prince charged it, or some kind of unit like a Mortarion or some 8-bound. Well, if I just simply punch it and then I touch the back of your orc mob unit away from where your characters have disembarked, well, in that case, you're not really going to do much damage to me. You're not going to pile in very far, and then you can't really clap me back. And then on the following turn, I'm going to munch into you as an enemy unit. That's not good as an orc player. Therefore, this allows us to really take that away from enemies as an option. But not just that. What really makes this invaluable, in my opinion, is how we want to utilize this stratagem, opportunistic stratagem, right? That's how we should be thinking as orc players. This opportunistic stratagem on them. We want to impose this on them by letting them know and having units on the field that can actually utilize this stratagem to really change the game. So we'll talk about that when we talk about what units we're going to use in combos. So some people look at this as like a defensive or like a an eject button, a get out of jail free card button. It very much can be that, but it can also be I impose my will on you now because I have access to the stratagem, which is a more proactive way to look at the stratagem as an orc player, which you should be doing in this detachment. Then we have dead sneaky. We have one commando or Stormboy unit can be picked up off the battlefield at the end of the fight phase and put into strategic reserves. Now, this is where I think people are sleeping on Stormboys. Now, a lot of the time they think, well, Stormboys have to be screened now because the enemy might get charged by them. No one's actually scared of 5-man unit of Stormboys if they're a experienced 40k player. Usually, if they have it screened, then it's screened enough that they can't even get onto the objective, and they have to wait a turn to actually get off on it just by coming in. So they'll make you like force an ingress, and then they're still not scared of that unit, right? So it's not necessarily that you want to use it for the offensive potential. You want to use it for the secret mission potential. You want to use it so that you can change the game by getting a battle line unit in your enemy deployment zone at the end of the game, and therefore, like, that's how you can really impact the battlefield with dead sneaky. Now, of course, you can do it with commandos as well, but that's where I really think Stormboys is one of the ways that I think Stormboys are overlooked, that they can be more explored in this detachment. Then we have on to the next. So in your opponent's movement phase, when that unit falls back, the orc unit that was engaged with it can make a normal move up to 6. Now, what I think is fun about this that people overlook as well is that you can use your bomb squig. So if you actually make your normal move, because it says in a normal move, if you have a bomb squig on that breaker boy unit, on that tank buster unit, whatever it may be, you can end the squig hog boy unit. You can end up throwing the bomb squig to that unit as it runs away from you. So if it is like a character that's trying not to die, for example, you can just be like, well, if you fall back from me because you're scared I'm going to fight first, I'm going to throw my bomb squig at you, and then you're going to die if I get it. That's could be impactful. Now, it is opportunistic. It's not too dynamic, but it is something to keep in the back of your mind, because that's how this detachment works. It's a lot of opportunistic play that you'll be either making or taking advantage of, which is what makes it fun. Then we have crunching descent, which is like you pretty much charge into people. You get an engagement range on a D. You roll on the D6 on the 4+. You get a mortal wound up to 6 mortal wounds. Not too often brought, but let's say you have to advance and charge with the unit of Stormboys. Because you've advanced, you can't throw a grenade. But if you have the CP investment, or you really just have to kill a couple more of these units, take a couple more wounds off this unit, then you're gonna pop crunching descent. So you can just put maybe 1 or 2 mortal wounds into it. Again, opportunistic. Not too often brought, because I think CP management is very important in this detachment. You're still going to use basic the generic strats, basic overwatch, basic grenade, and then you're going to be trying to use fight Papa as often as you can. So stratagem, CP management is very important. And what's also very important is a shout out to our sponsors, the Baron of Dice. So they make high quality custom dice. If you enjoy our content and want to show some love, check out the Baron of Dice. custom WAAAGH Tactics dice to support us. Use our discount in the description because nobody likes taxes. So shout out to the Baron of dice and their high quality dice. Very much appreciate them and their dice. So we move on to the mounted tactical unit. So I know that they're not too powerful. I know that they're not going to win any GTs necessarily, but hey, that's not what we're all about here. We're still going to talk about how your mounted units have some play, right? So let's give them a shout out before we get into all the meta stuff. I wanted to cover a little bit of the mounted talk. So we have a little bit of play here because they can get tactical orders, and I do think that getting +1 strength potential or stealth goes a good long way in a lot of these units. So let's talk about what I mean by that. So starting off with the most overcosted mounted unit, which Squig Hog Boys very much are, but like we said before, bomb squigs are quite important in this detachment. And even though Squig Hog Boys are overcosted, I do think that if you're an up-and-coming Ork player, if you're a League, Crusade, if you're playing 1,000-point games, whatever it may be, you can find a way to play these guys. Don't be discouraged. And if you're using them in this detachment, they do appreciate the fact that you have access to sustain hits. They appreciate that you have access to the redeploy enhancement in this detachment, and they appreciate stealth, and they appreciate +1 strength. Now, +1 strength might be overlooked because you're thinking, well, they already have lance. Yeah, but what if I can get them to even higher strength thresholds? They're already base strength 5. Then you're going to give them strength 6 on the wall, and then you're going to give them strength 7 from an order, and then they get lance. Okay, now you're cooking, right? And then this does stack, as we're going to have an honorable mention out here with the kill rig, with the kill rig's ability to get +1 in the strength. So any of these tactics and orders do get +1 strength stacking from the kill rig if they're in kill rig range. So if you're Squig Hog, you're already having a fun time, having good play with that. You might have a skill rig on the table. In that case, you can even give more strength to the Squig Hog Boys and then take advantage of that Squig, which gives them even a little bit more play in the game because right now they just struggle because they don't hit too accurately. They don't really have AP, but still want to give them a little bit of a shout out because having a feel no pain, a 5-up invuln, and then stealth can be interesting also. Then we have Mazrog. So I have experimented with running Mazrog alone. I do think that is overcosted, but I know some of you Gitz are crazy and still want to have some play. The fact that he doesn't have to play pivot is nice. He's a nice ground base. He can give out orders when it's not his go time. He can access a distraction current effects. He can fall back and charge. If he is not alone, let's say that he is with a unit that we have, like a small unit, and he does get into combat, eventually the Squigs are all dead. The fact that he can fall back and then charge again, as he's one of the only units that can actually endure that much combat and interaction, and possibly that we have, he's one of the only units that can do that. He at least gets the capability to get that off. Now, of course, he can also get stealth, or he can get +1 strength, which is kind of good because his gut rip on himself when he's not fighting vehicles and monsters sometimes can be underwhelming. So as much as you can offset that wounding potential, that helps him too. Then we have Ork Bikers. So Ork Bikers are probably the one unit that is dynamic and can be used and is versatile that I can advise that you place on a list once in a while or fill out a list with. So Ork Bikers actually have play out of more than most of these other units that we're going to talk about. They're good for skirmishing. They're good for coming out early and trying to touch objectives with a respectable OC. They're respectable shooting and fighting. They actually have some speed, which is something you kind of lack in this detachment, other than your trucks. But a lot of your time, your trucks are going to be acting as mobile bunkers or safety bunkers for your tank busters, your flash gate combos, your beast bosses. So you're not really, exposing them unless you're utilizing the good old solo mech trick of giving them +1 to hit and utilizing firing deck. So Ork War Bikers can kind of come out, get the game kick-started, kick scouts, kick other cheap battle line type units off objective, kick other infiltrators or something like that off the game, and cause some good investment because they're T6, they have a 4-up armor, good wounds. War Bikers are quite respectable, and if someone's sticking around that can throw them an order here or there, that could even be even better. Then we have Def Killer War Trikes. So Def Killer War Trikes and the Beast Boss and the Squigosaur are not something that I would advise you to even look at, even if I'm saying for 1K or anything like that. Not that I'm saying don't use it just because I'm saying that. I'm just saying I don't personally find to be too dynamic. I find the Def Killer War Trike base to be absolutely huge. And then he takes away of what the value the Bikers kind of already bring. So, and then you end up already having a lot of characters on this list. So Trike doesn't really find his way here, in my opinion. Neither does the Beast Boss on Squig. If they do find a way on this because you just want to use them and you don't really mind and it's all good, you understand what their weaknesses are. The fact that they can hold the redeploy enhancement is the value out of them. So because the redeploy enhancement has to be on a unit that is on the battlefield at the time that you're choosing the redeploy, it means that, you know, the fact that he's already on the field, not inside of a transport, means he can redeploy and not really hinder you. So just keep that in mind. That's one of the good things. And then, of course, like I wanted to say, the honorable mention, the kill rig. So the kill rig does have his strength stacking. He's not really mounted. Of course, he's a vehicle. But I wanted to put him in this just for fun. But what I really like as well is that if you have the skill rig and you have a solo mech, the solo mech giving the skill rig +1 to hit, and then someone giving the skill rig an order for +1 strength, and then the skill rig giving itself +1 strength, makes it a nice fighty vehicle pseudo monster type of unit. So I wanted to give him a shout out because even though he's not mounted, he kind of looks like I'm mounted, and that's how a lot of people want to play him. So because I felt like doing that. Then we move on to the cunning leader tactics. Shout out to you guys in chat. And then we go cunning leader tactics. So there's some obvious things here that people like to do and some that I really just wanted to unpack for maybe the new or intermediate players. So one of the cunning leader tactics that I kind of alluded to earlier was the baby mech being a cunning git. So the solo individual baby mech, this is how this tactic would typically work if I unpacked it for you. It's a solo baby mech that can have God Boomer. Isn't necessary at all to do this, but sometimes you'll have it. Will be embarked in a transport, whether it's a battle wagon, maybe even a truck, for example. But he will not be attached to the unit that is inside the transport that is also with him. So this can be a 10-man unit of storm boys within a battle wagon. Both these units disembark at the same time, and the solo mech ends up yelling the tactic to said storm boy unit that we're using as the example, and then they're also giving that battle wagon +1 to hit. So in this way, this 45-point unit is buffing 2 different units and then possibly even doing a secondary. So this is a nice, very cunning tactic where you'll disembark the 10 storm boys. They'll get the 3 inches from disembarking from the battle wagon, and then maybe a mob of boys will get into the battle wagon, or 3 small units of tank busters with their sags attached to them. And then in this case, when those storm boys do go off, they're now given orders. They're now able to get +1 strength. Maybe they're going to have sustain given with them. They might end up using the crushing, mortal wound potential. If they don't, it need to advance. Simply because they already got further enough, because they already had 15-inch movement, hypothetically, from disembarking from the battle wagon. They might be inclined to now throw a grenade and then charge into you because they're not really that strong anyways. So this is a nice cunning tactic. It really puts the enemy on the back foot instead of you as the orc player in this detachment, because that is one of the weaknesses in this detachment, that people want to pressure you because now we are the gun line that doesn't have, doctrines to fall back and do a bunch of dynamic things and a bunch of different reactive moves and stuff like that to avoid combat. So in this case, it's very much just good old-fashioned run into us and start tagging us like we would normally do to a gun line. Having something like this mech Storm Boy combo not only is very fun for anybody who owns too many Storm Boys and can never use them, but it actually kind of puts the enemy on the back foot. Now, there are weaknesses to it, but the fact that the Storm Boy is in the transport means that he can avoid a Oath Overwatch, for example, and such like that. So don't overlook it. Very fun, cunning leader tactic. Another slept-on leader tactic that I want to mention is the Big Mech plus 5 Luda combo. So when I first heard about this, shout out to Mark Perry. When Mark Perry was talking to me about this, I laughed. And then I was like, Mark Perry, what are you talking about, bro? But when I really more thought about it, a solo, Big Mac with 5 Ludas is an excellent combined arms unit, and it is at a moderately low cost, 120 points. So you're going to come out with some auto cannons, a custom Mega Blaster. Somebody puts a dumb unit on an objective, on your natural expansion, on their natural expansion, wherever it may be. But this unit gets its way out the field to fight skirmishing early. It can end up shooting its auto cannons at you and then charging you. If you're not on the objective, he can give that unit +1 to hit and then still charge at you, punch you with his power claw, punch you with his big driller, whatever it may be. And then if you have anything, if he survives and he consolidates to something and that thing falls back from him because it's a small unit, there's a chance that he can make a normal move and pass through another enemy unit and keep moving up and around the field. So acts as a SWAT team as well. A lot of overtime overlooked, but I know that you orc players like to be creative and cunning, so we're going to get stuck in with that, lads. And then something that I really do think should be still thought of and still brought up, that I know you guys think I might be beating a dead horse because you guys have been around and watch my content a lot, but I think this has just been being more true and tried and true and proven out the more that the meta unfolds, is Zagra, Wartsaga, and his super runs have an extremely good dynamic plan to this detachment, and the reasons for that. In this case, him getting any kind of order, let's say that like that I said, mentioned baby mech is still around because he's already yelled the orders at the storm boys and now he's chilling. Well, maybe he's next to Zod, and now the following turn on that he can give Zod order of stealth, and in that case Zod's -1 to wound, and now he's stealth, and then he's run up the battlefield, done his Zod thing, and now he's ready to flip objective, and it stacks with the OC stratagem that allows us to get more OC. But on top of that, what it does is keep the enemy far away from us, keeps them at arm's distance. We have a nice fast scout. He can gunk up a lot of their gunline units. A lot of the time, Orc or Space Marine players or whatever gunline armies, what they want to do is put some kind of bait into us to get us to overinvest in some, because we really can't kill vehicles at a good cost. That's what a lot of Orc players complain about. Like, well, we have tank busters because the only thing that can kill anything for like effectively, that's a vehicle that has a good armor save, and that's very much true. So anybody that's used to us will try to get a trade-off with us, force us to call a wall or to overinvest. They pick up that dynamic killing unit that was used for a bad trade, which really kind of declaws us, and then we don't have enough momentum to deal with the rest of their vehicles. Well, Zod allows you to not only flip primary, keep the enemy away from getting gunked up grots in their tracks, but a lot of the time, because you also have the stratagem to fall back, shoot, and charge, it now means that this unit becomes a absolute priority, right? It doesn't mean that it needs to just be diminished. It doesn't mean it just needs to be move blocked. It doesn't need to just be absorbed. Now that the unit can still continue to do its little jingo and jump around the field and keep falling back and charging other enemy units that are in the further back lines, it means now the enemy has to invest into the killing that thing right now, especially if they already underestimated its potential. So like I spoke about before, we want to act proactive with what would be considered our weaknesses, which is that we can't utilize the wall very well, that we can't trade very well into vehicles. And in that case, well, you need units that are fast, maybe units that require a little bit over commitment, and the enemy units that keep enemies at arm's reach away, that don't require you to immediately disembark your tank busters and your breaker boys and your snaggas and your gas, right? So in that case, we'll talk about other units that are useful, but that's why I find Zod to be so useful. And he's just one example of how other units can do this too. But just think about it more in that way as we unpack this. That's why these are cunning leader tactics. And then the last little cunning leader tip tactic here is utilizing your ammo run during Overwatch. So there's sometimes where you have a Big Mac shock attack gun and the 10 flash kids are coming out to play. They've shot somebody up. Maybe your bomb squigs were helping you because you weren't sure if you're going to kill this demon soul grinder, for example, and you throw some bomb squigs at it. You shot it with another 5-man units of flash kits that are somewhere on the field. You've done a little bit of additional damage that you thought, and you go, hey, maybe I don't need ammo runs here. I'm going to just simply shoot this thing, kill it, and if I fail to do it, then I'll have to just throw a grenade at it with a different unit. So you still have a contingency plan. But in that case, you hold your ammo runs, and then on the following turn, when you get an Overwatch target, in this case, now you pop ammo run, and then you do Overwatch on that case. Get multiple activations out of that unit. So even if it does get crippled or picked up in the following turn, hopefully you've killed more units and have had more activations in it. So absolutely keep that in the back of your mind. Not always going to happen. A lot of the time you do want to overcommit to killing a unit, but that's why I brought up this scenario and comes to, being a cunning lad. Now, let's continue on what we were talking about with Zod, with melee support units, right? So units that can fight proper. Now, the reason why I put up fight proper there is because that's the stratagem for sustain. So keep in mind, as we go through these unit combos, they all have access to sustain or lethal as we unpack what they can do and what they're there for. So starting off with the knobs plus the war boss. So these guys have kind of been forgotten a little bit, but they're not forgotten to me in our hearts as orc players. That's because with their innate -1 to wound when they're led by the Orc War Boss. Getting stealth as well means that they act good when they're tucked up in a little terrain feature after they've gotten to a nice scuffle and crump some beakies. It makes them a lot harder to dig out. And in this case, let's say that you actually want the +1 strength tactic instead. The fact that they're typically sitting at that strength 9 baseline and the wall only getting the 10, getting to 11 means then they can now punch, maybe a Lehman Russ, for example, that doesn't have access to Armor of Contempt. And you're like, all right, cool. Now I can actually punch this thing down and actually finish it off. Absolutely love that. Now, like I said, you can pop lethal or sustain in that case. So depending on how many wounds it has left is what I would tell you to use it for. So which lethal or sustain to use it for. Then just simply you bring it because AP. Now, something in this detachment you can think you lack is the fact that you don't have a lot of AP on your units, essentially, as an Orc player already as it is. So knobs always bring you that AP potential, and then they bring you a good volume of punches alongside it. So don't sleep on knobs as support units. They're cheaper than Breaker Boys, cheaper than Gaz, and just bring a different profile than something like a Snag-a-Boy unit. Can fit different in a SWAT team truck. So I'm not saying one's necessarily extremely better or that this doesn't have a place. It's just that right now, currently, with how the meta unfolds, things that are more reliable into elite enemy infantry or vehicles do have precedent, and in point values actually matter here. And right now knobs are at a solid place, but it doesn't mean that it's a default you take them over Breaker Boys. A lot of the time you might find a place for them, or the Snaggas as well. So let's talk about Snaggas. Now, Snaggas are really, really good and have good value here because of the stratagems and because of the strength threshold that they get on top of the stealth that we just spoke about. So we know they have feel no pains. We know there's a good amount of bodies on them. A lot of the time enemies are really just left over like dreading the fact that they left the knob and the beast boss alive, and now those guys are going to go getting punches off on people and putting more dev wounds on enemy units and possibly pulling down enemy vehicles in that case as well. They bring a good amount of OC, so you can still take advantage of those strats as well. Like we spoke about with being proactive with the stratagem that allows you to fall back and shoot and charge. This unit itself gets more value than something like Knobs and Warboss out of the fact that it can fall back and shoot and charge. It can fall back, charge, get an objective, flip a primary. It can fall back, shoot, charge, and get devastating wounds into an enemy transport. So there are cases on the WAAAGH where you don't need +1 strength because it absolutely doesn't matter at all. In that case, stealth feels absolutely great. Then you go into a unit of Breaker Boys plus Warboss. So sometimes people think, well, that's, why would you bring that? You're already bringing tank busters. There's a case for not enough damage 3 profiles up into this meta right now. So, and also sometimes people don't want to bring 3 tank busters. They simply bring 2. Breaker Boys still have a good place. I personally like the Warboss on them because there's such a low volume of punches, even with sustain, but you don't want to be, held up maybe like a 10-man unit of 2 wound bodies necessarily by this unit as well. So the War Boss allows you to dig yourself out from being like tar pitted, for example. So the War Boss is multi-purpose here in his utility, and I still find the points for him if I'm going to be using him in this detachment. Then we have Gasgul, as we alluded to earlier. I typically like 3 Mega Knobs. I find that 2 bodyguard Mega Knobs gets chewed through too easily, and it allows the enemy to kind of navigate around Makari's 2-up info. I want the enemy to interact with Makari's 2-up info on the fight phase. I really, really do. Come here, right? I want that. So sometimes an extra Mega Knob allows you to get that. If you can't do it, though, don't feel bad. It's okay, just having 2. Then we have the fact that Makari's lethal aura itself allows these combined arms units that you're going to be using, your tank busters, your 5-man unit of flash gits, your 10-man unit of flash gits, whatever 20-man unit of boys that we spoke about, the Zagrot, for example. These units will all be really, really grateful of having access to lethal, as well as they've already been shooting DACA, as this is typically a combined arms attachment that favors more of the DACA. In this case, you've now supercharged the WAAAGH to be more impactful on the units that simply don't find too much value on it, or to assure the value on the limited units that you do have on the battlefield utilizing the WAAAGH. Not to mention that he has built-in critical 5+, so that if you give him sustain, he's innately getting 5+ sustain and lethal. And then, of course, just as passive orders of If it's not go time and he's just staged up behind the center terrain piece, he can interact with units that want to skirmish and give them orders. Maybe a biker unit wants to go out, a storm boy unit wants to go out, the 5-man flash kids wants to go get in a shooty match. There's time that he can give good play on that as well, and I really appreciate that, and I find it fun too. And then we have a unit of 20 boys. So let's say you don't like Zod, you're tired of the Zod preaching, that's absolutely fine. A 20-man unit of Storm Boys can do very similar play. I do think there is a conversation to be had of utilizing a Weird Boy. You can give, your unit +1 to hit, and the Weird Boy maybe goes off and zap, blows someone's head off. Typically, you won't do that. Typically, you give yourself +1 strength or stealth. But I do think you're not, crazy for utilizing a Weird Boy instead of paying the big cost of using a battle wagon. But if you do have a battle wagon, keep in mind that Orks Cunning has more value as you're redeploying this package, so you can deploy it on the optimal side of the battlefield and keep it away from enemy firing lanes. That being said, the 20-man unit of boys is there to, one, act as a fallback shoot and charge unit. Like I spoke about with Zod on that potential or that value. The 20-man unit of boys also wants to be, hey, you have to kill me right now on the wall. If you don't, I'm going to fall back and charge your primary objective. If you leave me with a couple dudes, because I'm a war boss, a pain boy, a knob, and 4 orc bodies, I'm going to regen D3, I'm going to move up the field, I'm going to charge, and I'm going to give myself more OC on your turn. It forces the enemy to bring even more guns out to play, which means what? It means that initial play that they had of, I'm going to bait you with some trash jump pack Marines, some trash incursors, a ballistas dreadnought, a multitude of these, what they would consider trash line units. Well, you're like, cool, I'm going to throw a snaggy unit, 20-man unit of boys, and 10 storm boys at you. I'm going to just tar pit you up in Zod, or for example, or Zod. Tar pit you, force you to come out with all your anti-tank and elite units, try to clear that all up on the wand. Then I'm going to come out to play on my actual, with my actual gun line units that can pit you up, my flash gits, my tank busters, throwing the bomb squids, breaker boys maybe come out to play on that point with their war bosses, whatever it may be outside of the wall, because you're taking advantage of the shooting aspect of this list now, and you've already sat on the defense and the punching in your other combined arms asset unit. The 20-man unit does that alongside, like we were talking about, Zod does, but in its own way, in a more tough way and a more punching up way. Really good on primary flipping, holding the mid table, keeping the enemy off passing that mid table line, because if they do try to crash into you, a lot of the time, even if they are very a shooting army, they don't want to be tar pitted by 20 boys being their if they are a punching unit, they don't want their transports being surrounded so they can't disembark either. So regardless if it's a punching or a shooting unit, or a lot of the time at the top of the meta right now, they are also combined arms armies that are sticking around right now in the meta, like Emperor's Children, like we were seeing to come out to play now. They don't even want to be tar pitted by 20 boys necessarily, because they're trying to disembark from transports and shoot you and charge you with those units that are set inside. So they even have to respect the distance from the 20-man unit of boys, which allows you to, play a longer game and prolong the game to have more options to win. Then we have the Titanic Walkers. No, not super meta or known about or used, typically used by like we talked about Mark Perry. If you check out those prior past videos, still has play. The redeploying of a Titanic unit with maybe the mech captain inside of it, or breaker boys, or ludas and a big mech, whatever it may be. Redeploying a Titanic unit and a battle wagon, or Titanic unit and multiple trucks, Titanic unit and the commandos and Zod, whatever it may be. That feels really good on the battlefield. And if you don't use either this 20-man unit or Zod, in some ways, the Titanic Walker can act as the similar concept, where they've placed something semi-respectable like a Deathwing Knight unit in the middle objective. You can now commit your Titanic Walker, maybe a Snagga unit, some 10 Storm Boys, or whatever it may be. They get into the wall fight. The enemy now brings out all its anti-tank guns, or multiple of them, to deal with the Titanic unit. And then now you've disembarked your multiple tank buster units, and now you've picked up all their tank units, charged what was left over with your tank busters, and then the game has now carried on and progressed in your favor. You've now offset what they considered a weakness with either the initiative, or by calling their bluff and forcing them now to overcommit on what they considered was a bait. So the Titanic Walker can sometimes be used in that way. Of course, if you're playing against like Space Marines Librarius, and they have the stern guard that can do dev wounds on it, something that's oath. Okay, yeah, that's not a good choice. Sorry. And that is not going to work. But there are other times in armies that don't want to deal with that and will have to overcommit, whether it's worth more demons or monsters, whatever it is. And then in that case, your guns can come out to play first. So let's summarize the strengths and weaknesses of the Tactical Brigade. As like we talked about, our strength would be our combined arms asset, our tank busters, high potential into monsters, vehicles, elite 3-wound infantry units that are along the meta, having breaker boys being able to get strength thresholds that are higher than something like custodian units, for example, in combat, or vehicle units is really nice as well. Having access to sustain, allowing us to peak some of our best combat units like Snagas, Gazgul, Thraka, Knobs, Boys, whatever it may be, is really clutch. Us being able to impose our will, like we always like to do in something like Green Tide, for example, or even Warhorde sometimes, flipping objectives and having good primary mission play. This stratagem, that access that it gives us, allows us to do that as well. So as we like to trade bodies for points, the orders give you access to that. So whether you're playing it in a very missily, a lot of characters running out to do all the damage archetype, or if you're trying to play some cunning Gitz, as we spoke about earlier, whether it's, issuing orders from mechs or Gaz or Snick, that's something that you can use to be a more dynamic player. Now, things to avoid as traps as the orc player with this is disembarking something like tank busters too early into a bad trade. So a cheap enemy vehicle, for example, that's kind of durable. Something that comes into mind is like an Onager Doom Crawler from Admech, right? So that unit, you can pop it quite reliably, so to a fit, like not reliably, excuse me, that's the issue. You can pop it and feel like you're going to do it reliably as an orc player, but that unit, based off its 2-up armor save and its toughness and its wound count, has a chance to simply tank that damage. And then it has the proper profile with its Gatling gun that's twin linked to shoot up that tank buster boy unit. And it's a bad point for point trade, as the incinerators may come out to play after that and kill the rest of your killy units. So in that case, in that matchup, that's where more speed kind of units coming out to just tag those guys and gunk them up, force the enemy to bring more assets out to kill. And then you can bring your killing units out to pick those up that were used to invest in your OC flipping units, or your, like I like to keeping people at reach units, whether it's Zod, 20-man units of boys, Mandos with squad leader, Storm Boys giving orders, bikers given some kind of buff. There's different ways that we can use this, and it's really up to you as the orc player to decide what tools you're going to use in that case, because we've just outlined how you can maybe overcome those weaknesses that we said. So if you think I broke it down in a good way, or if I missed any more of our strengths and weaknesses, any more cunning tactics and plays that you want to let me know, give them a shout out in the comments after this video. And of course, shout out to Andrew Stone for 10 WAAAGH Tactic memberships. Whoa, Mr. Andrew is super supportive as always. You get, because it's like you, we can keep the content going. Next week we'll be doing the archetype breakdown with videos, with list examples and such, so keep a lookout for that. We did redo all of our playlists, so they're way more comprehensive and easy to follow, thanks to guys like Andrew. And we're gonna be coming out with another membership video with our boy Brandon, and we talk about the hunt and even more talk about Tactical Brigade as we explore those detachments as well behind the membership video. So thank you very much to Andrew Stone. Give us some WAAAGHs in the chat and knobs in the chat for that. And of course, last but not least, we have to give a shout out to our sponsors, Forge Fire Gaming, as they have high quality competitive terrain, acrylic bases that are slouted to allow you to remove them and get accurate measurements without interrupting your actual game and placement of models. So check them out in the description. It's what I use at home and will be using for a good amount of my after action reports. So shout out to Forge Fire Gaming. Check them out in the description. So thank you to everyone who showed up. Of course, if I did a good job, leave a thumbs up. If I did a bad job, leave a thumbs down. Let me know how I can improve. And hopefully you guys still are supercharged for this excellent DAKA detachment that also brings you the potential to knock Gitz teeth out. So with that being said, there's only one thing to keep in mind. Is don't cross our wall, because we'll knock your teeth out. Whoa!